So hi everybody, my name's Emma. I am a principal business architect at the Co-op. So it sounds really fancy. It's not. It's all about designing organizations and making sure that they're sustainable and kind of solving really knotty, enduring problems and getting people to look at the world a bit differently and understand why the things are the way that they are. So I started doing this about a year ago, but looking back at the rest of my career, it's kind of all been building up to do the same thing. So a lot of different roles across technology, across the co-op and the food business. So a big part of my job a couple of years ago was as a business manager for the food CEO. And that was basically, how do you look at the whole food business with all its kind of 45,000 employees and understand what all the problems are and how you can solve them so that it stops impacting the business and impacting our colleagues, which is a lovely challenge to have, and absolutely petrifying when you're in it as well. So I thought I'd explain a little bit about what business architecture actually kind of practically is, just in case anybody's not heard of it before. It's quite a kind of, I suppose, a new thing. So it's all about bridging the gap between strategy and execution. So translating your strategies into the kind of building blocks or capabilities that you need to actually deliver it. So you don't just end up kind of having every 3 or 4 years a new strategy that's kind of the same thing because you've not actually managed to deliver the old one. So for me, it's all about fixing the right problem with the right solution in the right way and in the right order so that you get that sustainable change. And it's about helping people to invest kind of finite capital and resources in the right way so that you get the most that you can out of it. So yeah, hopefully that's useful. And if anyone's got any questions, more than happy to try and help.
I've got one.
Go to.
So the tricky one with startups is like prioritizing. How do you determine which one is important in a strategy when someone's still fairly new? How have you dealt with that as a problem?
So I guess a lot of people that they're starting tech startups, they kind of know a little bit about product management. So I sort of treat it as whatever your business is or whatever your area is, you treat it as if it's a product within itself. So how do you understand what those little building blocks are and what's the bit that's fundamental? So I use a technique that's called value stream mapping. So that helps you to understand how you deliver value to your end customer. So for, say, a food organization or a retailer, it'd be plan, buy, move, sell. Those are the things that you have to do in order for that business to work. And then what are the things that you need to do underneath that to make it happen? And then you look at the whole picture and kind of say, right, if I can do one thing, what of these things is the most important for me to start with? And just keep chipping away at it and seeing where you get to and making sure that you're able to kind of see how it links together and why what you're doing is meaningful. Because I know, in a couple of the product teams that I've worked in historically, everybody kind of cherry picks the thing that's nice to do. And you've done loads of stuff that's really nice to do and you've really enjoyed it, but you're not any closer to delivering what you want to deliver.
Totally, I hear that. How do people take to changing direction then when it potentially has to happen? So if you're in that environment where you've got a couple of developers and a tester and a product manager, or probably even less than that, you've got one person doing all those things and they're quite comfortable doing, getting the website working. How do you help people to navigate when change needs to happen in those environments?
I think it's, for me, so I've got a background in change management. So I developed a lot of the change management framework for the co-op. It's about putting the people at the heart of it and explaining why. So why are we doing this and why is it really important? And what does it actually mean to them? And what does it mean to your end user? So if it's the case of we're changing, the piece of work that we're doing at the moment to something else because we've realized that actually this isn't going to work for us and we need to do something different, it's making sure you bring in that context and that people have got the chance to feed back on it and ask questions. And so it's a two-way conversation, not just a tell, which I think can be quite difficult in really big organizations, but in startups as well, because you're often so close to the rest of the team that you don't want to kind of upset anybody or cause any friction, but sometimes that friction's really healthy. And it's not about letting people take it personally, but saying what we're trying to do is work together to deliver something that's fantastic for the future. So sometimes we're going to have to switch direction, and it's not about you having done anything wrong, it's just about us thinking about things a bit differently.
Yeah, it makes sense. When I sort of recognize the architecture in your job title, business architect. One of the things that kept popping to my mind is kind of this image of like a jigsaw puzzle, fitting things together. How does that work with people and deadlines and timelines in your opinion? What's been the most difficult thing in your job so far?
It's a really good question. I think, well, when it's something like the co-op, it's because there's so much going on that trying to break it down into the little bits makes it less overwhelming for people, but it's also really scary because once you've broken it down into those little capabilities and you can say, this is what we recommend you need to change, and this is what you recommend, and we need to do this first and that second, it becomes really, really easy to then go off and do things, which for a lot of people can be really terrifying, because it's like, oh, you know, I've existed with this problem for so long, I'm really comfortable being within this space, I don't really know if I want to make it better, because what if that means that I can't do the same things that I've always done, or I've got to change. And it's a lot about sort of selling to people there's a real benefit to looking at the world in this way and to changing something a little bit. And it might feel uncomfortable, but we're there to help you through that. It's not a case of just, you know, we give you a pack of paper that says some stuff you should change and then we bugger off and leave you. It's more about, okay, how do you feel about that? What are you reflecting on it? What's the thing that you think you're going to struggle with? And getting them to be, I suppose, kind of a partner with you on that journey.
It's really fascinating actually listening to you. It's making me think a lot. I'll throw out a question to anyone out there actually. If you guys, anyone has a question, please do unmute yourself and ask. Before I throw out a question, I'm going to ask you one that's to do with the end process. So what does it look like when a company set out a strategy, they've gone through this value stream mapping, and they're now at some point where stakeholders are going to say this has been done properly? What does that tend to look like with a working team?
What does it look like?
How does success look normally?
I think it depends on what the products and services that they're delivering, to be honest, Chi-Chi. So a lot of it for me is kind of, you've got that healthy tension, you've got people able to feel that they make a difference. If you're working in an agile way and you've got kind of a Kanban board, then you're seeing things move and flow quickly, and you're able to kind of have those confident conversations about what are we doing, why are we doing it, when do we think we're going to be able to finish that, do we know what we've got coming up next? And there's just sort of a flow to everything because people understand how it fits together and how what they're doing on a day-by-day basis helps to make a difference for the overall organization. And it kind of, I suppose for me, it gives a lot more job satisfaction because people are able to go, do you know what? I know what I'm doing. I know why it's useful. If I do this thing, I know I can challenge if I'm really struggling with it. I know there's a supportive team around me. It's that kind of rallying together to try and do the right thing. So that's probably the biggest thing I think you'd see. But also, you know, when it comes to some of the practical stuff, you'd have a backlog. You'd know exactly how you're going to prioritize things. You know what's coming next. There's also kind of a calm, I think, because you're not just, I don't know if everyone else has been the same, but my partner's recently started working with a startup, and they're all running around like headless chickens because they want to do absolutely the right thing, but there isn't any time to sort of feel like you can step back to look at the big picture and then go back into it. So I end up doing a lot of going, okay, well, talk to me about your problems and what's not working, and have you thought about this, and let's coach you through it. So yeah, hopefully there's some calm and you feel like you know what you're doing.
Okay, so implicitly what you're saying is not just about the product, whether it's a website or a service or something. It's more about the processes you've put in place. So you've mentioned there in passing having a backlog. You've just referred to some project management tools that we take for granted working in tech potentially. But for other people, I think for someone starting afresh, how do they get a bit of that perspective in their planning, even if they haven't got Jira set up? How do you get someone to have the right perspective with strategy with no tech?
That's a really good point. So at the base level, I would describe business architecture as you are translating your strategy into the capabilities or building blocks you need. So it might be something as simple as, I need to be really good at communication so that I can communicate with other people. It could be something like that. But then you look at it through the lens of people, process, technology, data, and culture. So if you're thinking about it through those lenses, you can challenge yourself to say, okay, do I need any extra people to support me with this? What kind of person do they need to be? What sort of skills and experience do they need to have? What kind of technology do I need to support me to do this? Actually, can I just do it myself, or do I need some kind of technology solution? What data am I going to need access to, and how do I get that data? Is it flowing in the right way? All that kind of stuff you can build on as you go. And then when it comes to the processes, actually, how can I set up a process to make this stuff work? And you'll learn and develop as you go. And then it can be really useful to come back in, say, 6 to 9 months, depending on how much time you're able to spend on your startup, and reflect and say, okay, so where we've grown now, if I were to ask myself those same questions, are the answers that I had before still right for me now? Or is it worth me changing and looking at something a bit differently?
This is actually really helpful for me because, believe it or not, I'm in the middle of another startup, but that's for a different podcast. You mentioned people, places, tech, data, and culture. Those are the 5 things to be aware of. What's the places part in reality? Is it because we're all working from home? A lot of us are working from home.
Sorry, that's just my enunciation. It's process. So what is the process that you're going to have? But places is actually a really good thing to think about as well. So can you deliver this thing in a virtual world, or actually do you need to have a space to facilitate the conversations that you're going to have? Is it worthwhile you know, hiring a space to have workshops and things, and to do things in person with other people in your organization or with other partners? Because you'll get a very different conversation and you'll get a very different outcome depending on whether you do something virtually or whether you do it in person.
Yeah, no, this has actually really been good. So the reason it's so good for me is because, like I said, I do think a lot around the product more than the process and everything else that goes within it. And because I've identified that as a weakness now, I'm trying to sort of find ways of strengthening strengths and getting people involved that can help me with the weaknesses. It's the mindset around process that I find very interesting, because I think it takes a certain way of looking at things that makes you think, actually, let's just step back and go, what are you trying to do? Like you said, and what are you trying to achieve? Would you say that someone has to sort of sit down and think through at least their vision part for what they're planning, and that organically comes out of that? And how would you encourage someone who's very much let's do this first before doing the strategy? How do you encourage them to get that mindset?
I think it's really hard if you're just going to try and do it by yourself. So I'd often say, have a person that you want to talk it through to. So when it comes to figuring out the vision and what you want to achieve, if you talk to a person that has no idea what you're doing and you try and explain it to them and they don't understand it, you probably need to be clearer and you need to work on it so that it becomes this really, really easy to understand thing. And then, when you're trying to work out your strategy, it can be really useful to have somebody to talk it through with. So anyone that listens to the podcast or anybody that's here now, if you ever want to chat about stuff and you want another opinion, then more than happy to do that, because often you're totally right. You're so invested in it. You're like, well, I see where it's going and I totally get it and I'm going to make it happen. And then actually it can become really, really difficult, because as you're growing and as you're scaling, everyone else isn't necessarily on the same page, because what you're trying to get to, they can't see it because you've not been able to communicate it to them in a way that is as meaningful to them as it might be for you. So that's not trying to get myself extra work, so I'll happily do it for free. It's always just a chat and I can talk the hind legs off a horse, but really going through a person and talking to them about it, and kind of getting somebody to help you throw rocks at what you're thinking can really help. So I use something called a service model canvas or a business model canvas. Really happy to share it with you afterwards. And then if anyone wants to use it, you're more than welcome to. I can pop it on Twitter as well. But it sort of gives you this one pager of your business by asking you a series of questions. So whether it be about the key activities, what your service proposition is, what the key costs are, what the key revenue drivers are, all of those things that you need to think about when you're setting up a business or when you're delivering a service, it makes you think about them and put them on one page so that you can then go, right, I'm now really clear. Everybody else is really clear on this. We're all on the same page. let's move forward with it. And it can be, you know, it can take you an hour, it can take you an hour and a half, but it's a really, really useful exercise, because you'll find, even within teams within huge corporates, they all think they're doing something slightly different. So no wonder you're all pulling in a different direction, because you've not got the same North Star.
Yeah, no, it's brilliant. How do people get around that then in big corporates? How have you found the best corporates keep everyone along, you know, the same North Star line?
So I think it's very much like having people like me that are there to facilitate the conversation and kind of healthily challenge, why are you doing this thing that you've done for 15 years? Is it actually working? Oh no, it drives you all insane. Let's do it differently. Um, and and we're doing a lot of work at the moment that's sort of reorientating people around the value stream. So how are you delivering value to your end customer? How are you actually part of something much bigger that's delivering the value? So if you think about the food business, you might be a person that works in part of the commercial buying team, but without everybody else that's in buy, move, sell, nothing that you do would really matter, because the customer's not got the product in the shop. So how do you take them out of their little world and see the big world? And then how do you reorientate them to understand what service they're trying to deliver as well? And how do you get them to realize that they've got to work together with a lot of other areas and a lot of other teams in order to deliver that in the future? It's a daily struggle, and it's a lot of fun, but a lot of the times you're just asking people really kind of obvious dumb questions that nobody really gets the time to take and think about it, because they're so busy just doing.